Regarded by many as the next big thing, Nyck De Vries, the former golden boy of the McLaren Driver Academy, won almost everything there was to win in Junior Series racing, culminating in him winning the F2 Championship in 2019. Yet despite his clearly exceptional talent, an F1 drive never materialised. Having now been crowned as a Formula E champion, the seemingly ever-present shadow of an F1 drive has resurfaced, with the rumour this time being that he's in line to replace Nicholas Latifi at Williams next season. However, whether this move happens or not, by the start of next season De Vries will have turned 28, and with a large contingent of promising young drivers coming through, you can't help but wonder if his chance may have come and gone. This is what I had planned on saying at the start of this video, but since this year's Italian Grand Prix, everything has changed. But first, let's take a look at his career so far. Hailing from a small town in the Netherlands that I won't even try to pronounce, De Vries instantly excelled in kart racing, finishing in the top 3 of both the Dutch and Belgian karting championships for 2 years in a row. Having followed that up by winning back-to-back German karting championships in 2008 and 9, he would then win the 2010 World Karting Championship, before going on to defend his title a year later, having beaten out the likes of Alex Albon and Antonio Giovinazzi. Following 2 years spent acclimatising to car racing, he went on to win the Euro Cup and Formula Renault 2 Litre in 2014, and following 2 more strong years would join the Formula 2 grid for 2017. Despite taking a dominant win in the sprint race at Monaco, Nyck failed to win any other races that season, eventually falling to 7th in the championship standings, albeit driving a distinctly average Rapax car. For the 2018 season, De Vries moved to the Junior Series juggernauts of Prema, who were fresh off the back of delivering Charles Leclerc to the F2 title in the previous season. That season, De Vries would blow his teammate Sean Gelael out of the water, not that that's much of an achievement, but would also pick up 3 race wins, seeing him finish 4th in the championship behind George Russell, Lando Norris and Alex Albon. With the previous year's top 3 all promoted to F1, the 2019 season marked De Vries' best shot at the F2 title and a subsequent promotion to Formula 1. In the end, De Vries would take the title with 3 races to spare. Unfortunately, this is where his rise would end, as he was unable to find a Formula 1 drive for 2020, eventually ending up in the Mercedes Formula E team. In many ways, De Vries' story to this point was the result of the politics and finances of Formula 1. While no one was ever in doubt of his talent, he had no affiliations with any F1 team, and lacked the level of financial backing of other young drivers such as Nicholas Latifi, who, despite finishing behind De Vries in 2019, was promoted to Formula 1 ahead of him. Though he was almost certainly a better driver, the Williams F1 team was bordering on broke, so opted for Latifi and the money that he brought with him. At the end of the day, when it comes to Formula 1, cash is king. De Vries wasn't helped by the fact that his former McLaren team had recently promoted Lando Norris and brought in Carlos Sainz, while all the other Formula 1 teams decided to run an unchanged lineup into 2020. This meant there was only one spot for a rookie on the Formula 1 grid, and unfortunately, it was at Williams, who were in need of Latifi's financial backing. Being a third-year champion also didn't help his cause, as we've seen again this year with Felipe Drugovich. Winning the F2 title isn't a surefire guarantee of an F1 seat. Unless you're a bona fide future star like Leclerc or Russell, or have significant financial backing like Latifi and Zhou, most F1 teams prefer to stick with experienced campaigners rather than take a punt on young talent. Coming into the Italian Grand Prix, De Vries had added a Formula E title to his resume, and had impressive free practice sessions with Mercedes and Williams. But while the talks of him gaining an F1 seat remained ever present, his chances still appeared slim. While the Williams were no longer dependent on Latifi's money, they also had promising academy youngster Logan Sargent to consider. That weekend, De Vries was scheduled to complete a free practice session with Aston Martin, which he did as planned. However, the next morning, just hours before final practice started, Williams' number 1, Alex Albon, came down with appendicitis, ruling him out of both qualifying and the race. De Vries was drafted in at the last second, and with time needed to adapt the car to his height, he only had half an hour of practice before being thrust into qualifying. In the past, whenever reserve drivers were drafted in at the last second, it usually hasn't gone very well. When the likes of Robert Kubica, Jack Aitken, and Pietro Fittipaldi were brought in, none had particularly great races. But this is to be expected, as they had very little car practice compared to the rest of the grid, who had been in their cars all season. This makes what happened next even more remarkable. While teammate Latifi was knocked out in Q1, De Vries made it through, eventually qualifying 13th, Williams' fourth highest qualifying position of the season, and beating the likes of Vettel, Magnussen, and Tsunoda in the process. Come race day, De Vries started in 8th due to an array of penalties throughout the grid, but would have to contend with the likes of Perez, Hamilton, and Sainz charging through the pack. Despite this, De Vries managed to drag a subpar Williams car to an impressive 9th, superbly holding off the racy Guan Yu Zhou behind to take points on his Formula 1 debut. With 30 minutes of preparation, he had comfortably outperformed his teammate. Admittedly, with Latifi that isn't exactly a high bar, but he had also taken Williams' joint best finish of the season, a seriously impressive achievement. Following what many have called one of the greatest super sub performances of all time, De Vries' stock skyrocketed, suddenly becoming one of the hottest prospects in the F1 paddock. No longer was it just Williams who were considering De Vries, as he was rumoured to have met with multiple teams, not least Helmut Marko at Red Bull, with rumours swirling of a potential AlphaTauri drive in 2023. Though it took months to confirm, heading into the Japanese Grand Prix, De Vries was finally announced as an AlphaTauri driver for the next season, following Pierre Gasly's long-discussed move away from AlphaTauri to Alpine. And just like that, De Vries had gone from having an unlikely shot at a backmarker team to being guaranteed a seat at a respectable midfield team. Ever since his F2 title win in 2019, there have been those who have argued that he wasn't deserving of a seat in F1, that as a third-year champion, he wasn't good enough. While I agree he isn't of the same calibre as Charles Leclerc or George Russell, given his racing record so far, surely he has earned his shot at the big time. While there's likely nothing that will change the minds of his critics, to me it is about time that we see him on the grid. He's certainly no worse than some of the current drivers. De Vries' story so far is also a story of how one moment can change a career. How the Italian Grand Prix transformed his Formula 1 prospects is nothing short of remarkable. In one race, he went from an unlikely outsider to the most talked about prospect around. While he still needs to perform next year to retain his seat, so often in Formula 1, the biggest challenge is getting a foot in the door. It seems as though ultimately, Alex Albon's appendix may have just transformed Nyck De Vries' career.